Good evening. Welcome to the September 6, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. We can call it a roll.
Bauman,
Here.
Domes,
Here.
Bacon, Gates, Hoggalter, Iverson, here, Kibler,
Here.
Leiter, Longton,
Here.
Menham, Nesdahl, here, Offerdahl,
Here.
and Pontanila, here. And we have a quorum.
Okay, with that, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll move on to the agenda item number 4, the approval of the August 1st, 2023 regular minutes. Can I get a motion from the
I would move to approve.
motion to approve by Commissioner Kipler?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Domes. Can we have any discussion? Any discussion on last month's meeting minutes? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close the discussion and we're going to call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson, yes, Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdahl,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanila.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and then I believe I'm going to pass it over to city staff. I think we're going to do a little bit of a rearrangement or consolidation if I'm correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I apologize, Mr. Van Dyke.
It's okay. Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. Staff would like to switch item number 6 and 7 so that we're evaluating the Citizens Alley applications back to back.
So you want to move number 6 and 7 up to, and then move 5 back to closer to 8, is that correct? Just swap 7 and 5?
So item 5 would remain,
Okay,
6 would become 7, 7 would become 6.
okay. I got you.
Correct. Right, okay.
7 would become 6, okay.
So to clarify, I know the agenda on screen reflects what I'm asking or what Offerdahl is proposing, Chairman Offerdahl. The printed agenda is what effectively we're amending, so.
Okay. Is there any objections to that? None? Okay. Seeing none, we'll make that adjustment. So we can move on with agenda item number 5, is that correct? And that's a continuation from June 6, 2023 in the zoning map amendment with planned unit development at Citizen Alley. So this is a public hearing request by Askal Group, owner of zoning map amendment from CBD Central Business District and C2 General Commercial District to CBD Central Business District with a PUD overlay. Purpose for this request is to clean up the entitlements for the respective properties and to accommodate Citizen Alley, a multi-purpose community-oriented open space. So with that, we're going to turn it over to staff, and just a reminder that this has been a public open hearing here for the last couple months. So this is just continuation of that public hearing.
Thank you. Chairman Offerdahl, I was just going to give a brief overview for the Planning Commission since it has been tabled multiple months. And I think since it was originally presented, I think it's been about 3 months now. So just as a reminder, the current zoning of the properties, it's C2 General Commercial and CBD Central Business District. The subject properties are designated as downtown mixed use on the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. There's some images of the subject property. So the proposal seeks to establish a community-oriented activity area that would facilitate a variety of different uses, including outdoor recreation, amusement parks, farmers market, temporary sales, et cetera. This would include activities such as skating rinks, curling, and temporary sales of goods. Ultimately, the area between the Freight House and High Third Prairie Sky Bread will be used as flexible, programmable space to generate outdoor activities in this part of downtown. There are some character elements related to lighting and signage included in the plan unit development proposal. And again, there was a neighboring property owner objection. We did incorporate a 7th condition, which I'll go over in the recommendations to ideally address this objection. Here are the findings of fact, and they can be found in staff's written report. On to the recommendation. Well, staff is recommending approval of the zoning map amendment, including the plan unit development overlay, subject to 7 conditions. So the first one being any portion of property that does not comprise Citizens Alley addition is not part of the scope of approvals and must follow all requirements of the underlying zoning district for which the property resides. Some of the renderings do illustrate use of some railroad property as well as a redesign or a reuse of a stub segment of right-of-way. And so we just want to make sure that there are separate means to achieve that via encroachment permits, things of that nature. At the end of the day, those areas are largely intended for access and parking. Those are allowed in all districts, so regardless of the use being proposed. Also, as a reminder, Central Business District does not require parking. It's unrelated to the proposed unique activities that are part of the plan unit development. But I just wanted to point that out, that that is not part of the plan unit development, that it is separate and distinct, although it may piggyback on the proposal, but is supportive in nature and not necessarily part of the approvals that are presented today. So number 2, just related to signage. Mr. Ackerman, the applicant, was pretty thorough with regard to what his vision was for signage on the property. So we just defer to the plan unit development proposal with regard to that signage. Temporary signage is also addressed. And there's inevitably going to be a myriad of signage and replacement signage. We want to make sure that irrelevant signage that is dated and no longer necessary is removed in a timely manner. And while some of these uses typically require conditional use permit, interim use permit, temporary use permit, so on and so forth, the entire purpose of the plan unit development is to be flexible and proactive with regard to programming the site. And so at the same time, city doesn't want to just create a situation where it's an anything goes. We still want to review these site plans, make sure that as issues arise, the next time that same event or a similar event occurs, that we're able to address those issues and progress and allow that activity, but also not to prohibit the flexibility of the space to be programmed as needed. So condition 4 provides some relief from some of the other basic permitting requirements, but not complete relief. So we do need to at least evaluate it, make sure that the layout and functionality of the site is orderly. So, right, and so any of the conditions of approval that we might have with regard to related to the site plan review, but will be related to the negative externalities that potentially might occur or be generated by any of the on-site activities. This is a basic development will comply with all site plan review and approval requirements. And then the 7th one, so this is the new one. So the legal rights afforded to the public via the public access easement shown on the Cowles Edition plat shall remain in effect until such time as the public access easement is removed, following applicable procedures outlined in the City of Minot Land Development Ordinance or the North Dakota Century Code. At the end of the day, The easement's still there. I get that there's an objection received related to the easement. The easement is not in question as part of this application. The use of the property is what is being evaluated. So please keep that in mind. Nothing about this, if it's approved, would eradicate that easement. So the PUD is not getting rid of the easement at all. We put this in there just to hopefully put the objectors' mind at ease with regard to, we recognize that it's there. We want to make sure that it's upheld. Until that time, it no longer exists, right? So that's all that 7 is. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff on this?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Van Dyke, how is it that number 7 puts the concerned parties' mind at ease? What is it about it that is easing, makes them comfortable?
For Chairman Offedall and Commissioner Kibler, we're acknowledging that the easement is there. That was the objection.
That was
Otherwise,
what they
the
wanted.
objection is completely irrelevant to the subject at hand, which is the use of the property. The use of the property could be conducted taking into consideration the easement that exists there. I think some of the site plans that were submitted by the applicant do depict certain activities encroaching into that easement. We're not approving those renderings necessarily outright. We still require for each event for the applicant to submit a site plan to be reviewed, and then we'll also attach conditions if needed to mitigate those negative externalities. This one, we're clearly acknowledging that an easement exists and it needs to be upheld so long as it exists. So I think that is ideally was the comfort that we're trying to provide to one of the neighboring property owners.
Thank you.
Any other questions for city staff? Okay, with that, we'll open it up for a public hearing. Is anybody attendant that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? If you could, sir, just sign the old notebook. I think you've done this once or twice, haven't you?
I'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Ryan Ackerman. I am one of 2 members or owners of Askal Group, LLC. The other member is Jessica Ackerman, who's my wife and is here this evening. We've assembled the information within the planned unit development application, including the design of the improvements, which are detailed in the PUD documents. A couple of the introductions of people that we're joined by here. We're joined by Raleigh Ackerman and Rob Berard of Ackerman Surveying and Minot, who are responsible for the development of the preliminary plat of Citizens Alley Edition. We're also joined by Jack Dwyer of Dwyer Law in Fargo, who's the legal counsel for Askal Group. As your agenda indicates, and as we've talked about already, there are 2 separate issues here for this evening. One is related to the proposed zoning and the uses, like Mr. Van Dyke described. And the second, which will be the agenda item after this, is going to be related to the vacation of the Kyle's Edition plat and the corresponding preliminary plat of Citizens Alley Edition. To avoid repetition, my intent is to speak this one time unless I'm asked questions or to respond to information that I think is needs to be corrected. We've developed what we feel are very detailed descriptions within our proposal, and we hope that the commission has had the opportunity to review those over the past several months. So out of respect for the Planning Commission, we don't intend to offer a lot of repetitive commentary about the merits of what we're proposing. We appreciate Mr. Van Dyke's summary of the proposal. We've reviewed the letter of objection sent in by attorneys Nick Meyer and Ryan Corney of Olson & Burns, representing RMM Properties, who is Richard Olson of Olson & Burns. I sent an email to Mr. Van Dyke with our responses to that letter yesterday, and I believe the commission has received that email, hopefully. So I'm not going to attempt to belabor this by offering those comments and repeating those points here today. With that, I'll simply state that we're here We're ready to respond to any questions or concerns that you have. Ultimately, we're trying to create something pretty unique in downtown Minot, and we do appreciate your consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess one question just for the commissioner staff. Did everybody get a chance to read them? Okay, so do you have any questions on them, on that response that he is referencing? Okay, thank you, and we'll call you up if we have any further questions. Sir. Thank you. Is there anybody else in attendance who wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item?
Nikki Meyer with Olson and Burns.
Okay.
In regards to this agenda item, I'm here in regard for RMM properties, and I'm just here if you had any questions in regards to their concern with the application. When their initial review of the application, it appeared that the application for zoning also included the plat change, therefore they objected to it because of the vacation of the easement. Therefore, in regards to this application, they have no objections to the change in the zoning.
Okay. So the number 7, that kind of cleared things up, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, well, we'll call you up if we have any more. Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak on this agenda item one way or another? Okay. Yes, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I'd move to
This is
approve
Commissioner
based on
Baumann.
staff findings of fact and all of the 7 addendum terms.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion of approval by Commissioner Kibler to include all the 7 recommendations and the staff's finding of facts, and a second by Commissioner Domes. Is there any discussion on this? Commissioner Baumann, did you have something to add? I kind of heard you.
I was going to move to approve, but since I have it, I'll just say that I appreciate both parties and city staff working to find a solution for this particular item in a way that allows it to move forward. So just some appreciation for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Baumann. So right now we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson. Yes. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdall,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanila.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, which is also the Citizens Alley Vacation Plat, preliminary plat. Public hearing request by Askal Group, owner for a request to vacate Kyle's addition under section 40-50.1-16 of NDCC. Kyle's addition is described as being a portion of the Sioux Line right-of-way, portion of lots 1 through 5, block 1, original Minot, and lots 1 and 2, and portion of lots 3, 5, block 23, and lot 9, block 30. So first edition of the city of Minot, North Dakota, and the portion condemned Welcome Street. Further, Askal Group requests preliminary plat, established Citizens Alley addition being the 3-lot subdivision comprised of the proposed to be vacated plat of Kyle's addition and west portion lots 1, 2, and 3, block 1, original Minot, and lot 4, block 1, original less the Sioux right-of-way. With that, we'll turn it over to the staff for their findings and fact and report.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. So here is the property once again. As Chairman Offerdahl read out, so there's 2 components to this. One being a preliminary plat, which you're all familiar with, and then the other part of this is a vacation of the plat, which you would have never seen. So with regard to a vacation of plat, in my staff analysis, I do point to section 40-50.1-16 of the North Dakota Century Code. Within the land development ordinance of the city of Minot, we do not have a specific procedure for a vacation of a plat, and therefore we defer to North Dakota Century Code. We do have a separate fee for a vacation of a plat, but we don't have any codified local language to kind of guide through it. So we just defer to North Dakota Century Code with regard to what a vacation of plat is. At the end of the day, the governing body, being city council, is the one who has the final say, just like most plats, or all plats really. And so really could go straight to city council since it was part and tied to a preliminary plat. And we had already been discussing everything else related to it. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that a plat vacation was being proposed. As far as the preliminary plat goes, what is being proposed is a 3-lot subdivision of what would be the vacated Kyle's Addition, as well as multiple other lots that comprise another old sub. So one thing to note on Lot 2 is a myriad of easements that are being proposed along with this preliminary plat. Each one is different, has different shading and correspond to existing buildings on site to provide specific access to those property owners so they're able to get back and maintain their buildings. Really the only thing to note here there's some site photos again, different angles from before. The preliminary plat meets all of the subdivision design standards of Chapter 10.3. Here are the findings of fact. At this point, Planning Commission can recommend approval with conditions, or recommend denial to City Council. And staff is recommending approval, subject to a few, recommend approval of a vacation of Kyle's Addition, a preliminary plat of Citizens Alley, subject to the following conditions. So prior to or in conjunction with approval of the final plat, the subject property shall successfully secure approval of a zoning map amendment to CBD Central Business District with a PUD overlay. So maintenance easements shall be incorporated into the final plat document subject to approval of the city engineer or their designee. And utility easements will be included. Then the final two are related to any potential work within the right-of-way associated with this. As always, we require financial security when there's any work within the right-of-way, and then generally that also occurs via development agreement when there's any significant right-of-way work that's required. So I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody wish to speak on behalf of this agenda item?
Good afternoon again. Nikki Meyer with Olson and Burns on behalf of RMM Properties LLC, or LLP, excuse me. They have filed an objection in regards to the vacation of the plat of Kyle's Addition and the proposed preliminary plat of Citizens Alley. This was provided in a written objection. I believe that you should have a copy of that. If not, we can provide that. I've also had some additional discussions with the assistant city planner, with the assistant city attorney and the city planner, excuse me, and followed up with a follow-up email in regards to those objections. And I don't know if they have that at this point yet or not, but I can provide that as well. The vacation of Kyle's Addition would vacate the public access alley, which has been dedicated to the public. RMM Properties objects to the vacation of the alley as it provides public access and travel throughout the alley. And this alley's been used had been used frequently in the past for travel by many members of the public. They believe that the public's right to travel through this area is a significant right and that it should not be discontinued. This is also further set forth in the written objection that you have on your file. We also state that the proper procedures for vacating the alley are not being followed in this case. The vacation of the alley and approval of the preliminary plat cannot be accomplished without consent of RMM Properties, LLP. Under the circumstances that we have here, both North Dakota Century Code 40-50.1-16, which was cited by the planner, cannot be applied independent from 40-3905, which is the vacation of streets and alleys. Due to this alley abutting the property of RMM Properties. In State Bank of Burleigh County Trust Company versus City of Bismarck, the court concluded that in order to close an alley, the owners of the property which adjoin that property of the alley to be vacated are required. So RMM Properties has not consented to this, and therefore we don't believe that this is the proper procedure being utilized in this process. Further, any vacation of the alley would result in landowners that are abutting the alley obtaining half interest in that alley, to the center line of that alley. So the vacating of Kyle's addition would revert 12 feet of that alley to the owners of the abutting properties, one of which would be RMM Properties, LLP. Therefore, in order to approve the preliminary plat, they would also have to be in consent to that and be a party to that plat, and they are not. So just in sum, they don't agree to the termination of the public rights to travel throughout the alley at this time as it's currently dedicated, and they do not agree to give up the rights to half interest of the property that is abutting their lots. There is a maintenance easement shown on the preliminary plat, but it is a maintenance easement. It is not a public access easement, and it's actually less than the area that they would own once Kyle's addition is terminated. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer, or at least try.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what kind of maintenance is going on in that little spot to be vacated?
There is no maintenance going on in that spot. The preliminary plat that was provided by the Askal Group shows a maintenance easement in lieu of the public access
Oh, okay.
travel. And we do not agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? We may call you back up if we have some more, so. Anybody in attendance wishes to speak on this agenda item? Anybody? Okay. Any further comments? Yes, sir, if you can state your name and.
Yep. Good evening, Chairman Offerdahl and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Jack Dwyer. Sign in here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
So I'm here just to address the comments that were made by Ms. Meyer. I guess the two, challenges that were brought forward. First of all, was with the first challenge was the the vacation process. There are two different provisions in Century Code that allows for a vacation of a plat. One of those is in Chapter 40-39, and that requires the neighboring landowners to consent to the vacation of a plat. The process that's being pursued with the vacation of Kyle's addition is under 40-50.1, which allows the landowners of all of the lots within a platted property or within a plat to vacate the entire plat. And so, because Askal Group owns the entire Kyle's Edition, they pursued the process under 40-50.1. In speaking with the city attorney, or the city attorneys earlier this afternoon, one of the city attorneys pointed out that there's an attorney general's opinion from 1997 that indicates that only one of the two processes needs to be followed. So we don't have to follow the consent provisions in 40-39 in order to seek vacation of the plat under 40-50.1. And I guess the second challenge relating to splitting vacated right-of-way down the middle and conveying that property to adjoining landowners, that would take place if we're vacating right-of-way that's owned in fee by the public. In this case, we have a public easement where the fee title, the land underneath that public easement, is owned by Askal Group. And so the century code that provides for splitting right-of-way down the middle indicates that there's a presumption that property is owned to the center of the right-of-way, but a contrary intent can be shown. In this case, there's no question that the land underneath the easement is owned in fee by Askal Group, and so in that case, there would be no reason to split that land down the middle. And I guess, lastly, I would just, ask the Planning Commission to make a decision based on the merits of the application on the proposed land use. And, we're hoping that you won't be distracted by these legal challenges, which we do not believe are, meritorious. And, I guess your assistant city attorney is here and can speak to these challenges as well. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. We'll call you up if we got anything. Okay, public hearing is still open. Anybody wish to still speak on this agenda item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm going to turn it over for a motion from the commissioners.
I wonder, rather than a motion, I wonder if Mr. Van Dyke couldn't speak a little to this issue as it pertains to planning. The land underneath, the Askal Group owning all of the property. I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, but, you're in with this
Is that
stuff.
something that we want to take a motion first and then have that as any discussion?
Oh,
Yeah, probably.
That's probably the right angle, I would say, to do. So let's go with the motion first. and then we'll
I'll make
open it up.
a motion to approve
Okay.
based on staff finding of facts with a follow-on question and point of clarification.
And I'll second it with those conditions.
Okay, I appreciate that. We got a motion with Kibler to approve, and then we got a second by Commissioner Domes, and now we've got any discussion, so I think we can open it up for this now. And then, that's okay.
Sure. So Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, so I'll speak to this procedurally. City staff, includes our own legal team, believes that 40-50.1 is the appropriate mechanism. We recognize that we have a separate fee in place. And the other means to achieve division would be similar to what Attorney Dwyer had indicated with regard to right-of-way that is joining a property. In this case, we've got a public access easement that was created through Kyle's Edition and is being requested to be eradicated through the vacation of Kyle's Edition. Without any other guidance, our specific code in Chapter 10.2-13 related to vacations of rights-of-way specifically refers to when right-of-way is adjoining a piece of property. In this case, this right-of-way is within the property itself. So being the author of that language, I could speak with a bit of authority and say that the intention was for rights-of-way that were dedicated through some plat that were intended to be roads at one time, but maybe never manifested themselves, right? Minot's not, it's not a foreign concept for Minot. We have a lot of plats out there with rights of way that just go effectively nowhere. The goal was to assist in processing and facilitating land assemblage so that they could be redeveloped and re-subdivided and accommodate that through vacation of right-of-way. Point being would be Mr. Nathan Smith's property that we just evaluated vacation of right-of-way. It was a stub road. He has every intention to redevelop, so we did apply Chapter 10.2-13 to that case. Here we have request for a vacation of plat. So just looking at it through that lens alone, regardless of these other mechanisms, we have a fee for it. We clearly have an application that we are willing to receive. And then we have North Dakota Century Code, which we defer to, which just points to the governing body evaluating whether or not they should vacate the plat. And so that's where I'll leave it. I just defer to that. I'm not going to get into the nit and gritty. I think it's just not my place, but I can say staff, myself, the city attorneys, all agree that the process that we're following very much appears to be in line with all available known information on how to proceed. So I think that is the staff's recommendation, still the same with the conditions and everything. So I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Any further questions for Principal Planner Van Dyke? I would like to talk to or hear the assistant attorney's thoughts on this as well while we have a discussion point. If you got a few seconds, you got a speech prepared for us? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Afdal, members of the Planning Commission. I would concur with what Principal Planner Van Dyke has stated. We have reviewed this matter, believe that it's appropriate process to move forward in this particular situation, and so the Planning Commission should evaluate the application in full confidence that this is an appropriate direction to go. It's not the only direction, but it is an appropriate direction.
Thank you. Any questions? Anybody else have questions for Assistant Attorney? Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chairman Afdal.
So any further discussion? Currently have a motion of approval and a second. So we'll go ahead and call our roll to that motion.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdal,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanila.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 7. A public hearing. Let's see, I gotta get my right page here. Highlands, yep. Public hearing request by Brian Billingsley, Community and Economic Developer Director, City of Minot, on behalf of Four Seasons Construction Incorporated and 701 Development LLP owners for a variance to a street side setback of a classified street. The request includes a variance from 25 feet to 15 feet for Lot 1A, Block 1 Highlands at North Hill, 2nd Edition, and from 25 feet to 10 feet from the street side setback for Lot 1, Block 1 Highlands at North Hill, 3rd Edition. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings of fact and report.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. So there's 2 different properties, as Chairman Offerdahl mentioned. Both are highlighted in white. And then the notification boundary for each of their respective properties is provided in pink. So 2601 Granite Drive Northwest is to the north, and 2521 Granite Drive Northwest is to the south. So this is a city-initiated variance of all things. If you recall, we did facilitate a plan unit development request to kickstart or redevelopment of this arrested development. I want to say maybe about 8-10 months ago. And the subdivision has approximately 150 odd lots. And so in doing so and establishing basic setbacks, one thing that we didn't take into consideration is these two lots. So these two lots with our plan unit development relaxation from 25 feet to say 10 foot, 40 feet to 25 feet does not accommodate basic homes to be constructed on these two lots. And so really what we're doing is saying, okay, our intention was to help this subdivision move forward. These two lots were not honed in on when we were looking at the broader 150 plus lots. So this is just really a kind of a correction, I would say. City championed attempt to just kind of fix something that was unintended. So here's an illustration of the proposed variance. So if we were to apply setbacks as they are now, it would be within that pink area, blue and pink together. And so if you look at even the most reasonably sized home, which is very small on 2601 Granite Drive Northwest, it starts to take away at the rear of the property. So that particular layout, which again, these homes that were proposed back 5-10 years ago were extremely small. So now you can't even fit even a small home on 2601. Same goes for 2521. This is a twin home lot. If we apply, the setbacks go as deep into that pink coloring again, and now you can't accommodate one half of the twin home. So what we're proposing is that you reduce the applicable setback by the shaded area pink. So that the only thing that applies is that blue area. This frees up the lot to be developed as intended with similarly sized homes as the rest of the subdivision. It also accommodates an utility easement that runs through there as well. So worked with the property owners, the original developers, the builder, and even the easement Central Electric Cooperative also chimed in, and all are supportive of this. So as far as stakeholders go, I think we addressed that there was no neighboring property owner opposition. And so really we're just trying to clean this up on behalf of them that was the intent again, to remove help assist untangle that ball of yarn of entitlements. This is just one last tiny knot that we need to undo, and more than happy to assist them with this. So the zoning, again, it's that R2 with the PUD. Land use is urban residential. There's a couple pics of the subdivision, which is well underway of being developed now. These two lots are chomping at the bit to get constructed, and this variance will help ensure that everything's kosher for those two lots to move forward. Effectively, we find that the lots are narrow enough. Again, keep in mind, a plat was not part of our original approval. So they are narrow for what they are. As I showed, the applicable setbacks would prohibit any type of construction, reasonable type of construction for a twin home or a single family. Findings of fact can be found in staff's written report, and then we are recommending the variance be approved as laid out in the recommendation here. And I'll stand for any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Van Dyke. So in both of those instances, the setback variance that's requested is a setback off of the road easement? There's no house that would ever be built
Yeah, so Chairman
between
Offerall.
the vacant lot to this restricted easement or variance.
Oh, yeah, so Chairman Offerall, Commissioner Kibler, we go back to this image, and I know probably could have blown it up a little bit more, but
Yeah, this is,
bad. So the easement, I'm not sure, can you see my, no, you can't. Okay, on the image to the left, there is a black line just off of the dark, there's this dashed line that abuts the property boundary along the northwest. That's just about where that easement ends. So effectively, what we're doing is we're reducing the applicable setback by that area shaded in pink. That easement will still be able, I mean, it's not being interfered with at all.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for city staff? So this is just a little clarification for my part too, is this is just a variance for these two particular lots up there. It doesn't address everything else. And it's
Correct.
basically the old hardship rule of a irregular size, or is that correct?
Yeah, Chairman Offerdahl, that's correct. Essentially, the applicable setback of 25 feet would render those two lots unbuildable.
Agreed. I agree.
So,
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Now I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody who wish to speak against this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak at all on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and I'll turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
I'll make a motion
Commissioner.
to approve based on staff findings of fact and recommendations.
Second.
Motion to approve by Longton and second by Commissioner Pontanilli. Okay, any discussion?
This is Commissioner Bauman. I just want to say thanks to staff. Obviously, reactivating this arrested development is a really positive thing for the community and for homeowners and just the population in general. I appreciate your work to kind of navigate through these two unique ones, and I am not a champion of huge setbacks to begin with, so I'm glad to see that we're just eliminating some of those barriers to home ownership and to affordable housing and ownable homes. So good job, staff.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson. Yes. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdal,
yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanilla. Yes. The motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Moving on to agenda item number 8, conditional use permit. We had a public hearing request by Ready Builders Incorporated and Ready Rentals LLC, applicant on behalf of Imperial Properties, owner for a conditional use permit to establish a construction yard in the C2 General Commercial District. The legal description for the property is Lot 2 Wall Hood, 3rd Edition. That will turn it over to staff for findings and report.
thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. I'm actually going to hand the reins over to our assistant planner, Tara Lindquist, and I'll be driving.
Can you hear me? Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. So the subject property is located in southwest Minot near the Highway 2 and 52 bypass. So we can see the subject property is highlighted in white and that notification buffer is in pink. The land is currently vacant. The applicant is applying for a CUP, because they'd like to implement a construction yard. So a construction yard in this case is defined in the Minot's Land Development Ordinance as an area used for the parking and storage of construction-related equipment. So such yard may include construction offices and such shops as are necessary for the business. Next slide, please. The subject property is zoned C2 General Commercial currently, and that northern property line abuts an MH Manufactured Home District, so that's a residential district. And because this C2 property abuts a residential zone, our ordinance requires that the applicant implement a buffer zone, which I will get into alongside staff's recommendation and conditions. Slide, please. So here's the future land use map. The subject property is designated as general commercial on our 2040 comprehensive plan's future land use map. So that's that magenta color we see here. Complementary zoning districts to the FLU map general commercial designation includes C2 zones, which is again what this is currently zoned as. Next slide. This is a site plan. We can see here the proposed construction shop and office space for Ready Builders, which is the business to go in here. And we can also see the proposed parking as well as the driveway approach and some landscaping. So that's the general layout of the site that they've proposed. Next slide. Here we have some site photos and the surrounding area. So in the photo facing northwest on the left, we can see the Highway 2 and 52 bypass. In the photo on the right, facing north or northeast, we can see some of the residential properties, again, in that MH manufactured home district that abuts that northern property line. Next slide. So here are staff's finding of fact. As usual, they can be found in staff's written reports. So the applicants have submitted a complete application. The property is, as I mentioned, C2 General Commercial District currently. The future land use map designation is general commercial as well. The proposed development meets the use standards subject to conditions for a construction yard in C2 general commercial districts per section 4.1-7C1. The development complies with section 9.1-4F1 through 8 with conditions as outlined in staff analysis section of staff's written report. And the Minot Planning Commission has the authority to hear this case and decide whether it should be approved or denied. Next slide, please. So staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt the staff findings of fact and recommend approval of a conditional use permit for a construction yard with the following conditions. So this first condition is in regard to the requirement for a buffer yard along that northern property line. The owner or developer shall install and maintain a 20-foot wide landscape buffer yard on his or her site, abutting the entire length of the boundary along the residential site. Each required buffer yard must be entirely landscaped with grass or other suitable plant material with a minimum of 1 tree for each 20 lineal feet of buffer yard. At least 50% of the required trees shall be evergreen conifers, 5 to 6 feet minimum in height. The remaining 50% of trees can be ornamental trees, deciduous canopy trees, shrubs, or a combination thereof. And these are standard requirements for most buffer yards in general, as required by our ordinance. Next slide, please. So the second condition refers to the use standards for a construction yard, and this is required for all construction yards in C2 zones. All outdoor storage areas shall be fully screened to a maximum height of 6 feet or to the height of storage racking, up to a minimum height of 10 feet at the time of installation. This third condition refers to the construction and location of a driveway. Driveway placement and separation is subject to approval by the city engineer or their designee and will be evaluated at the time of site plan review. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Very well done, by the way. Any questions for city staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm just curious, are there any sound restrictions for a business like this or in the C2 designation?
So I believe the buffer yard is meant to kind of help filter out some of that sound pollution and light pollution. So that would be, that's there for that purpose. That would be kind of the restriction.
That is one of its formal purposes, to abate sound?
On top of physically separating the two uses, that would help filter out both sound and light.
I also think in this area too that there's other construction businesses already there. United Rental, I believe there's electrical shop over there, Hewish Sprinkler, so it's kind of.
Chairman Offerdahl and Commissioner Kibler, if I could just add, noise pollution effectively is handled through the municipal code. And so it wouldn't be in the zoning code per se, nonetheless applicable in this case. I want to say it's I'm not going to get the decibels correct in this case, but nonetheless, it's adjoining a residential district, and therefore it needs to have the same, it adheres to the same sound thresholds as residential district, which are actually less than normal commercial. So there's rules in place to handle that. They're not just able to conduct the activity without any consequence should it be exceptionally loud. Construction yards are also typically normally a day business, not running all night long. So it's
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Van Dyke. So does this sort of application have to go through any sort of municipal approval for sound, or is that just something in retrospect? If there's a problem, you have a remedy through a municipal venue?
municipal code applies regardless of the zoning, regardless of whatever the noise ordinance will apply regardless of what's going on. The zoning district just tells you we're going to give a bit of more allowance of sound for certain commercial and industrial uses, except when you're abutting a residential district, then you need to mimic that residential threshold. So you get capped a little bit more when you're joining a residential district, is how it's written.
Thank you.
Any other questions for city staff?
Chairman Offerdahl, I have a question for Ms. Lindquist, if I can. On the proposed diagram of the site, it showed what I think is the buffer zone to the east, and I was curious if the property owner and developer also has a buffer zone to the north, because in the initial map on GPS or on Google Maps, it looks like there's residential areas on both corners. Is that correct?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Bauman. So the site plan that we see here was submitted prior to us having a discussion with the property owner about the requirement for a buffer yard, and that's why it would look a little bit different than what would be required now. Looking at the map here. As far as the residential use, so to the east, that is a C2 zone. So again, general commercial. And so per our code, I believe the buffer yard would be required on the north. I'm not sure if Mr. Van Dyke can elaborate on the eastern line requirements.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Bauman. Yeah, so the applicable buffer yard will apply to both the north and the east because it's a residential use or district. In this case, they do have, and they're showing to the east and to the north that the trees that will be installed, as well as even more, I would say, undeveloped area prior to that landscape. So you've got this, if you can see where all the trees are to the east and the north, then there's the shaded area that's going to be effectively undeveloped. And then you have their driveway further to the west. So there's actually a greater than a 20-foot distance between any of the activity that is proposed at this time and would be approved. If that helps provide some assurance to the neighboring residential uses and districts.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think when I'm viewing it online, the buffer yard to the north on the design that they submitted is covered. So that was probably mostly where my question came from, but I appreciate the extra explanation, and I'm glad to know there's a buffer yard on both the north and the east facing sides.
Thank you. Any further questions for city staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody wish to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak against this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak at all on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing and we'll turn it over to staff or commissioners for a motion.
I will move.
This is Commissioner Bauman. I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations and finding of fact.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Commissioner Bauman and we got a second by Commissioner Iverson. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none discussion, we'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdall,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes,
and Pontanila.
Yes.
The motion carries.
thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9. The public hearing request by Dutch Mill Development LLC, owner for a preliminary plat to subdivide one lot into 2 lots and vacate a portion of 27th Street Southeast right-of-way. The legal description for the property is Lot 1, Metz Addition to the city of Minot, North Dakota. With that, we'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
Thank you, Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission. The subject property is located in southeast Minot at the corner of 27th Street Southeast and Burdick Expressway East. So once again, we can see the subject property in white and the notification buffer in pink. The applicant's request is to subdivide the lot from 1 lot into 2 lots, both for commercial use, and to vacate a portion of right-of-way 25 feet in width, illustrated to the east. And the vacation is proposed to accommodate parking improvements and overall functionality of the site. Next slide. Here we can see a preliminary site plan, which was submitted by the applicant. The illustration depicts the proposed boundary, creating 2 separate commercial lots. The grayed out portion roughly outlines the area for the proposed vacation. The smaller structure to the west was previously used as a temporary residential space for visiting performers at the Rock and Horse Bar, which is what that larger structure to the east is. The smaller structure on the west is intended to be demolished and replaced with a new commercial building, and that structure to the east, which is again the Rock and Horse Bar, will remain. So some of the planned improvements to the lot include parking, adding parking spaces, landscaping, and pavement. Next slide, please. Here we can see the preliminary plat. So this plat illustrates a 25-foot wide vacation of public right-of-way, as I mentioned. Next slide. And as far as the zoning map, so the property is zoned to C2 general commercial, as is some of the other surrounding area. That's that pinkish color. Next slide. And on the comprehensive plan's future land use map, the designation for this property is light industrial. Next slide. Here we can see some of the site photos. So the photo on the left shows the west building elevation. The photo on the right shows the front of the Rock and Horse Bar, and we can kind of see that western structure partially shown in the photo on the left side. Next slide. These are staff's findings of fact, and they can be found in staff's written report. So the applicants have submitted a complete application. The property is currently zoned C2 General Commercial District. The property is designated as light industrial on the future land use map. The proposed preliminary plat meets the subdivision design requirements of Chapter 10.3 as applicable, subject to conditions. And the Minot Planning Commission has the authority to recommend approval or denial. Next slide, please. The staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt staff findings of fact and recommends City Council approve the major subdivision preliminary plat for Metz Addition with the following conditions. Number 1, all existing easements of record and any additional easements as required by the city engineer shall be included in the final plat. Number 2, a shared access easement shall be included along the shared property boundary, meeting the requirements of Table 6.1-5A. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff?
Commissioner Offerdahl, this is Commissioner Bauman, and I do have a few questions for Ms. Lindahl, or Lindquist, sorry.
Yes, sir. Fire away.
Okay. First one, when I look at the proposed design of the building, it looks like there's quite a bit more parking than would be needed for a building that size. I'm just wanting to make sure that that is a choice that the developer and the property owner is making to possibly create overparking or just overpark the space as opposed to requirements within the City of Minot zoning code.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Baumann, yes, that's correct. The parking that you see in the preliminary site plan is not, the amount that's there is not what was required by us. That was something that they had planned and submitted on their own.
Okay, thanks for that. And have we had any conversations with them? I'm just not a big proponent of parking lots, especially in properties that abut giant parking lots, which I know are privately owned and used for different purposes. But have we told the applicant at least that, you know, to consider if parking spaces can be shared, if different times of day use are applicable? Again, I would rather see landscaping or a larger building than more parking spaces than are necessary. Obviously, that's not my choice, but I just want to make sure, is that a conversation that we've had with the applicant?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Baumann, that is not a conversation that I have had with the property owners or the developers. I'm not sure if Mr. Van Dyke has.
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Baumann, not necessarily. I think their goal is to accommodate the even highest demand for this particular site, given all the events that occur at the neighboring state fairgrounds. I think they're erring on the side of almost near chaos, right? So they want to make sure that people have ability to get to and interact with this commercial site as simply as possible. So I think that is their motivation. They're not here to speak to that specifically, but it definitely is not a city requirement to require this much parking. However, if an applicant does submit a site plan with more parking than necessary, we don't necessarily have a mechanism to say, no, that's too much parking.
Sounds good. I can appreciate all the different facets of that. And obviously, I'm planning to be in support of this, given the information that's coming forward. But I'll just throw it out into the conversation then for the applicant. Like, if you don't want to have that many parking spaces, that is okay, especially as it's, you know, one of the entrance points for our community. There are other ways to be using that space if the property owner so chooses. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody attention that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Anybody that wishes to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Anyone that wishes to speak for or against this agenda item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
A motion to approve based on findings and facts and recommendations.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Nesdal and a second by Commissioner Kibler. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we will turn it over to Commissioner, or we'll call the roll.
Baumann,
Yes.
Domes,
Yes.
Iverson. Yes. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Nesdal,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
and Pontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 10, other business. Is there any other business to discuss this evening?
Chairman Offerdahl, members of the commission, no, there's no other business that I can think of. No, there's nothing. So unless you have something, Chairman.
Okay, I have nothing as well, so we'll move on to agenda item number 11, and that's adjournment. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.